brand is actually starting, right? Because products are becoming commodities. They're being commoditized. They look the same. So if you are going to produce a phone, it's exactly the same. It does the same thing, camera, WhatsApp, message, whatever. So what separates is the brand.
This is where the rulebook ends and the real brand talk begins. Welcome to On Brand. Welcome to Off Script.
There's a moment in every marketer's journey where the metrics stop mattering and meaning takes over, where the brand playbook no longer fits and what's needed is something deeper. Clarity, courage, a story people can feel. Dennis Mambure knows this space well. He's led brand evolutions in high-stakes environments, steered marketing across industries from finance to fast-moving consumer goods, and used brand not just as a business lever, but as a tool for progress. From launching campaigns that shift markets to mentoring youth on financial inclusion, Dennis isn't about branding. He's about what branding can unlock when done with integrity. Today, we go off script with a man who's worn many hats: speaker, strategist, author, father, poet, and always kept one thing at the center: people. So I've been trolling your LinkedIn and I picked a certain quote and I'm going to read it verbatim. And you wrote, "The unseen labor of brand leadership often sits in rooms where the story isn't told but negotiated. That's where value is either diluted or defined." And I was curious when I wrote this because you've written about the unseen labor of brand leadership. What's a part of the journey that people overlook or miss?
Yeah, so look, I think the whole issue around branding is not fully understood to the extent that there's certain components that are missed in the journey of brand building. So some will tell you that brand building involves a lot of advertising, for example, being out there, advertising and advertising. Whereas brand building is a science. It involves working with everybody in the organization, understanding the position of the customers and where they are, and make sure that your brand is understood, not as a name, but for the benefit that it gives to the customer, number one, and for the need that it satisfies. So those are some of the things that are missed when people are talking about brand building. It is more than what you see. There's an essence that you want to drive that is not in the eyes of the market, but that takes time for you to be, building, working on behind closed doors. So what you see really should be an outcome of a long process that is well defined, well understood, well curated, and a thought process that is beyond any challenges. Yeah.
And you had a long career in branding. And I'm curious, was there a point where it became more about the career, more than about the career, but more around something of purpose?
So in my mind, marketing is not a career for me. Branding is not a career for me. It's a calling. It's what I do with brands, what I do with the markets, what I do with the shareholder. Yes, there is a time where I was really chasing other things, career progression, promotions, and the like. In my young age, we're looking for things. But comes a time where you now want to change and start to drive purpose, where you drive, influence to the people, where you want to say, this is what I've done. I took this brand at this level, and with my intervention, obviously working with a team, I've taken it to a different place. So for me, it's really a calling that I'm trying to fulfill, that I'm trying to also ensure that there's a legacy that I leave at the end of my career. At some point in time, all of us will stop to work or do certain things. So for me, it's more about, purpose-led executions and purpose-led, careers that we look at. Yeah.
How important is it for you, for the people you work with, to have the same belief system when it comes to purpose?
It's very important, actually, because as you grow in an organization, your role is not technical. Your role becomes leadership. So if there's no congruence between the leader and those that are led, the team, then at times you won't achieve what you want to achieve. So it is important that we have got that alignment between the leader and those that are being led. So for me, I value it that much to say everybody that I work with should have at least a view of what I'm trying to achieve. Otherwise, no matter how talented we are, if we are playing as individuals and there's no congruence of alignment, then the results will not be achieved.
And talking about leadership, especially market leaders, there's an interesting quote I picked from a McKinsey study from 2023,
Mm.
where they talked about only 26% of marketing leaders feel they influence the entire enterprise. And that is incredibly small number. And I just wanted your thoughts on that. When it comes to navigating influences in the rooms that matter, how important is that to be able to influence decision makers in the organization?
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. The challenge that we face is if you go into the boardroom, whether to your executive committee or MANCO or whatever we call it, and you go in as a marketing leader, you have already failed before you start. Never go into a meeting as a marketing person. Go into a meeting as a business leader, trying to solve business challenges. So your influence will never come from your technical understanding of market or marketing. Your influence comes from understanding the customer's pain points and the resources that you have and how you can work and cooperate with other C-suite executives to deliver. So when I look at my influence, at times in a 6 or 5 hour meeting, probably I'll spend 30 minutes talking marketing or even less, but I talk business issues. That is what is important. The reason why marketing professionals, some of them, face challenges of influence is they wait for their agenda item on the meeting to then talk about, our campaigns, what we have done, the adverts that we have thrown. But what are the customer pain points? Are you competent enough to understand and interpret what is happening on the balance sheet? Can you talk about the profit and loss? Can you talk about cybersecurity? Can you talk about human resources? Can you talk about operations? Once you are viewed and accepted as a business leader, then you can influence. It's easy to come and say, look, I want to run a marketing campaign of 1, 2, 3, because I understand the whole value chain of the business. So influence does not come from your technical knowledge. Influence comes from your leadership capability and muscles.
So where do you think the tension point is when it comes to vision to execution, especially when you are influencing C-suite?
Numbers and value. I, at my stage now in my career, I am not excited about pretty pictures in an advertisement. I am not excited about vanity metrics. How many people have liked our post? That does not bring the value to the business. So if you understand that, the tension tends to be dealt with much easier. The tension is that we go in there, we want to push our marketing language, not the business language. Don't talk brand equity and the platforms and the talk customer centric language. When you're dealing with employees, talk employee value proposition. When you are talking about operation, talk about efficiencies. When you are talking about finance, ensure that you are talking about how to deal with negative jaws, for example. So you understand the language of business. Once you do that, the tensions in suicide tend to sort of dissipate.
Yeah, I find it then interesting then that when you, for marketing leads, you will find that they understand profitable growth in terms of what they need to achieve. They understand the customer journey. But you never see a lot of CMOs or marketing leads make the transition into CEO. Why do you think that is?
Um, while there's some factual accuracy in what you're saying, I think it's we can't put a broad brush to that. It's also industry specific. So if you are in FMCGs, for example, globally, most of the CEOs that you find in big brands, they've got a basis in marketing because the organizations themselves are marketing led, they are marketing oriented. If you come to finance or financial services, you can count probably even in our market here, it will be challenging to find even one who is coming from a CMO. Is the orientation. Because at some point in time, where marketing probably gets it wrong is we love our jobs too much, to the extent that once you become a marketing director, you think that's fine. At times, we need to pivot. So you grow in the organization as a marketing resource. At some point, if you're the marketing director, for example, in a bank, there's no way to go. You have really come to the apex of your organization. So what do? If you're fed up, you leave and you go to another bank, another bank. So you are always at the ceiling of your career. Clever marketing professionals now, they pivot. You rise marketing head or marketing director. You then say, okay, fine, what is the easiest route for me? I can't go into treasury, right? Maybe I go into retail, because within the bank, for example, or financial services, you might actually find that you work more with retail. So you understand what happens in retail business. So are you willing to pivot and say, okay, fine, I've been a head of a function. Now I'm going to be head of retail, even reporting to a retail director, because you want to pivot. And once you pivot, then you can find a way to become a CEO. But very few people want to do that. But in other industries, we see marketers, accountants, lawyers being CEOs. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's talk about brands, because when you look at brands these days, everything kind of sounds the same. Do you think the age of brand is over?
No, not at all. The age of brand is actually starting, right? Because products are becoming commodities. They're being commoditized. They look the same. So if you are going to produce a phone, it's exactly the same. It does the same thing: camera, WhatsApp, message, whatever. So what separates is the brand. Yeah. So within a marketing journey, there are two fundamental things that every person should understand. There's brand marketing, then there's performance marketing, right? When we're dealing with performance marketing, this is where you are saying, how do I increase my sales and what have you? But these things should be underpinned by solid brand, right? If we remove the names of some of the products and the branding, they look the same, taste the same, perform the same, right? If I were to put a collar here, just a collar, it'd be very difficult for you to make a decision. Probably it looks the same color. But the moment we brand it now and say, this is a Pepsi, this is Coca-Cola, you now have a preference. That's branding. That's the power of branding. Unmask that, it's exactly the same thing.
So when you talk to brand equity, how do you know when you're building brand equity versus performing branding theater?
So it lies in two things: measurements. When you are focusing on brand equity building, what are the fundamental pillars and guardrails that are in place? What are the things that we are going to measure? Because metrics become very, very important. So if I'm going to do performance marketing, I want to grow my sales by 100 units at the end of the year. If I hit that, I've achieved, right? So that's performance marketing. If I'm looking at brand, I want to drive my brand's equity. And what are the elements of brand equity? Loyalty, brand usage, advocacy, associations, all those things will come into play. So you have to then have measures in place. Consideration. Is it prompted consideration? Is it spontaneous consideration? When somebody thinks of buying a car, does he think Toyota or he thinks Mercedes Benz? So those are the measures now that you say. And you cannot do that without relentless tracking and measurement. Very few brands measure. Yeah? If we go out and say, how many times have you measured the health of your brand? Very few times. Why? Because measuring costs a lot of money. You can't measure on your own. Probably you need to ask an independent brand tracking organization to do it for you. Yeah. So if you look at a balance sheet of an organization and you want to sell a business, there's something that we call goodwill. That is a value. What is goodwill? Goodwill is a brand. You never see performance marketing featuring there because it is absorbed in the profit and loss accounts and everything else in the financials. But goodwill tells you how strong a brand is. So in my mind, the age of branding is actually much, much more important now than before. Those that may be arguing that brand is over, I think they need to go back to school.
Do you think brands are under pressure to play it safe? Or are they being braver?
Some are being brave, some want to play it safe. So what we need to do is to find a balance. What does playing it safe mean? Playing it safe is you can't be expressive about what you stand for. Why? Because now it's easier for your brand to be attacked because social media is available to everybody. But if you've got a clearly defined brand purpose, brand mission, brand vision, you have to stay true to your cause. And how do you do that? By being much more braver. And what does bravery mean? Bravery simply means staying to what you stand for as a brand without doubt, without apologizing for who you are. So there are certain brands out there that we know, if you talk about this brand, they'll go all the way. And there are some who are safer and the like. So the brand essence that you're trying to drive also tells you how we are going to behave in the marketplace.
For your older brands, you've been there for, your 100 years. There's an aspect of it of sticking to your brand and what you believe in, and then also taking into account the shifts in the consumer behavior. How do you then balance that in terms of not getting out of context of what the customer needs at that point?
Now, this is where it needs brand refreshes, right? Yes, there are certain brands. I'll quote one brand, Butter, Butter, the shoe people. That brand has been there for 100 years as a solid brand and probably still appeals because it is still meeting its primary mandate. So you can't go and force them to change if it is still addressing its needs. But there are certain brands that, because of time, because of the changing consumer needs, you have to do a brand refresh. And the challenge that I see is that at times, branding is not part and parcel of the strategic conversations in the boardroom. You'll find within an exco, branding reports into some obscure title, right? And it's a by the way kind of thing. But those organizations that think marketing and branding are critical, they will always know when it is time to refresh. So you create a brand today, you should be clear enough at what point do you reposition? At what point do you rebrand? At what point do you do brand refresh? And I've seen in the market, not in Botswana alone, but generally, there's a lot of misunderstanding around those three terms. So somebody thinks that they've changed the colors of the logo, they've rebranded. No, they've just played with the logo because branding goes beyond the logo. Branding goes beyond the colors. Branding is the very essence and DNA of an organization. If you do everything, you change the colors, you change the logo, and the culture of the people who serve the customers hasn't changed. You've not done a rebrand, right? So these 100-year, 200-year-old brands will need to continuously reinvent themselves. At times, you can even reposition without changing the logo of your brand. So it's understanding, it's the bravery to change, and also the willingness to invest in that. Because rebranding or repositioning takes a lot of money and investment into it. So if you look at it as a cost, you're already failing. It is not a cost, it's an investment.
And I want to go back to that because I've had conversations in boardrooms where the discussion seems to be like every new marketing lead that comes in, the first mandate is let me refresh the brand and kind of trying to change the perception of what's important or the reason why we need to refresh. What would you say would be the critical things that a marketing person can use to indicate, especially to the C-suite, the need for a refresh or a rebrand or a repositioning?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Every leader wants to change. It's not only limited to marketing, right? Any leader who comes, they want to be seen to be changing. And at times, the problem is you want to fix a car that is moving. At times, it's okay as a marketing leader to join, and your impact is not on the branding side. Your impact is maybe on how you meet consumer needs or customer needs, or how you deal with the pricing aspect. Because we're talking before we got into this conversation around how the P's of marketing have increased.
5 to 50.
Yes, when we went to school, we had the four P's, which were popularized by Professor Jerome McCarthy, who say there are 4 P's of marketing. Now they're talking about 20 something. But the fundamental issues is, as a marketer, I've got a lot of levers. I've got a product as a lever to play around and look smart. I've got pricing to look smart. I've got promotion to look smart. I've got distribution to look smart. So when I get to an organization and the brand is doing fine, and we can, quantitatively show that it's working, why change? Yeah, don't rebrand. Just let it go. So the issue around, how do you then assert yourself to the suit that you're doing well? Show the numbers. Have evidence. Evidence-backed marketing. Do you understand the fundamental elements of your marketing portfolio in terms of numbers? So for me, if I go in there in an organization, I look at the brand. Okay, what are the equity scores? What are we talking about in terms of consideration? What are we talking about people that are using our brand? Is there loyalty? Remember, if you want to go academic about it, the marketing funnel. How is it performing within the marketing funnel? How do I take my consumer right from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel? If there's no problem, there's nothing to unclog. If there are problems, yes, I take my mop and I clog it. Yeah.
So when you're working with brands, you also work with people. You either come in and find the team, or you need to build a team. And I've noticed a shift over probably the last 10 years, where you had your core departments, events, branding, and then you maybe have a side digital resource there. And there's kind of a shift towards more having your mini consultancies within marketing. You've got ESG coming in, sustainability, and a different culture and so forth. So how to balance when you're building a team, having the commercial aspect versus protecting the creative aspect of marketing?
So that's an interesting one, right? Because in my mind, if you want to change it at a team level, you've lost it. You have to change it at an organizational level, right? And say, what is the organizational design that we want? And what is it that we want to deliver? And where are our weaknesses? Structures and organizational design, by their very nature, should be fluid, right? Remember, if we go back to school, McKinsey's 7S model, structure, systems, those things, yeah, it will tell you that those things are fluid. So my structure is fluid. Everyone's structure should be fluid. So these days, I'll take an example of ESG. And it is still in its infancy in the boardroom. People will put it in their documents, in their papers, because it sounds fancy to talk about it. And you actually see people who are called ESG and marketing directors. And you ask them, can you tell me a bit about the governance side that you really do in your job? And you start to hear a little bit of stammering, right? It sounds nice. It sounds great when you put it in your annual report or integrated report and what have you. Yet what matters, number one, in my mind, no matter what the structure, is the shareholder happy? Because if you're working in an organization, your role is to ensure that you deliver value or return to the shareholder. Is the shareholder getting return for his equity? So return on equity becomes important. Number two, is the customer happy? Is she getting what she's paying? Right? So customer satisfaction becomes critical. Number three, are the people who we are working with able to deliver for these two? That's it. And that will determine your structure. Yeah. So you can have consultants, digital, media, baba, but if you are not going to deliver value to the shareholder and the customer is not happy, they've got no job. So for me, it should be very fluid. It should be very agile. You can change. I can have 5 different structures, but the core skills are the core skills in there. And now we are looking at renaissance men. What do you call a renaissance person? What is a renaissance person or a renaissance leader? It's somebody who can speak marketing, somebody who can talk public policy, somebody who can talk cybersecurity, somebody who can understand ESG, who can understand a lot of things. So if I'm not yet a nice salesman, just for the record, I'm trying. I can converse in terms of public policy because I've done that, right? And that's what I need in my team. And digital, if you say I want digital, what is digital? Because digital is changing at the speed of lightning. When we started our career, we just had probably one or two platforms. Now, how many platforms? Thousands of platforms. So structure is then determined by the transformative uh, power of the marketplace, of technology, and a few other variables.
So, as a person who's trying to build their career, which would you place more value on when it comes to versatility, your Renaissance man, or specialization, somebody who's able to just focus on a core function and excel in it?
I'll go with versatility every day. Specialization becomes very okay. Let's bring it home. Let's bring it home, right? In my portfolio, for example, I also look after communications, right? And so just imagine if within my communication team, I had somebody whose role was just to write. And now with generative AI, which I can tell, and I've got a lot of platforms, right? I can go to ChatGPT, I can go to Grok 3.0, I can go to Copilots, I can go to DeepSeek, and a lot more others. And I'll tell it, I will be speaking to Kushata, please can you generate and da 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 da. Within 5 seconds, with no grammatical error, it comes. So if my person was just good at writing good English, what happens? So I need obsolete. I'm obsolete. So I need somebody. But for me, what is more important is not what you know. What is more important is your agility to unlearn, learn, and relearn. That's important. As long as you can unlearn, relearn, and learn, you're my guy. That versatility is there. We can teach you other things. I mean, all of us, when we went to school, there was no ChatGPT. Why? But now we can speak authoritatively on it because we've got that learning agility. So that is what is important. Yeah.
Would you say the way you lead teams has changed over the years?
It is thoroughly. It is the fundamental principles and values that don't change. So the value of honesty, that one is a value that does not change. So it's something that is like a foundation to my leadership credence. But the how part of it becomes very critical. When I started leading, I was leading where there's no technology. I could be the superstar, right? Depending on how many books I read. But now, the more you are talking, somebody's checking you, is fact checking you. And you have to be fine with it. But somebody will call you out, no, that's not correct. And it's fine. Number two, wellness becomes very important now. People are worried about their mental state and what have you. So somebody will walk in and say, Dennis, my daughter is not well, and therefore I am not well. I am not going to come into the office. I'll come tomorrow. When we started work, that was not heard of. You would find ways. But now as a leader, I need to say, okay, it's not important for my person to be in the office. What is important is for my person to deliver what they need to deliver. So it means my leadership style needs to adapt and change, and we find ways of dealing with people. We're also dealing with new generations, people who
Gen Z.
yes, what do they want? Instant gratification, and they ask a lot of why. Even if you tell them an instruction, it's not enough to say I want this to be done. You have to tell them I want this to be done because 1, 2, 3. So there's a lot of explanation, and they challenge authority. So we have to change the way we lead.
And talking about the leadership, what's the emotional toll on leadership that no one talks about?
The emotional tolerance.
Or the emotional
Yeah.
leadership that no one wants you about?
Leadership, I think I wrote this a couple of weeks ago to say leadership is a polysemic and a malleable construct, right? By that, I was saying it can take different fashions and it can change. The toll that comes with leadership is huge because at times you fail to separate where your day starts and where your day ends at an individual level. Now, if your teams also are going through the same thing, they can't, differentiate where their day starts and where their day ends. You find people sending you their own personal problems at 7 at night. The natural instinct is to say, no, we've knocked off. But probably somebody's actually in a fix. So as a leader, there are times that I have to say, okay, fine. Now I'm not talking as your line manager. I'm not talking to you as a brother. Or I'm not talking to you as a fellow human being. So leadership is no longer limited to just attaining results for the organization. Because how many times or hours do we spend in an office? Probably 9. So there's that toll. There are burdens that we carry. If, for example, the organization is not performing well, and you have seen the numbers and you know that the organization is not performing well, as a leader, what do you do? Do I walk out of the meeting looking gloomy? Or I have to manage it on my own and ensure that I look positive when I go out to my teams? So those are some of the things that you deal with emotionally. There are emotional issues. If I am under pressure, who do I talk to? The team still expects me to lead them, motivate them, push them, and so you have to balance. So you need to then be able to connect and disconnect and reconnect. That's important. Unfortunately, in this age of 24/7 connection, we call it the always on leadership, right? Yeah, we always like to put it. My door is what's open, right? I'm always reachable. But in reality, that is putting a toll on your leadership because you want to be effective at home, in the office, and in all dimensions of life. So the tolls need to be managed. Mental wellness, I'm a big fan of that. I talk about it all the time. You need, as a leader, to find ways to break, to stop, to disconnect. Yeah, disconnect, reconnect, and connect. That's important.
And talking about that, because marketing is almost always on as well, is there work-life balance? Is there such a thing?
That's a very interesting uh, question, really. That is, in fact, it's a question of academic importance now. There are some schools of thought that says there's nothing called work-life balance because you're assuming that work is not life. Therefore, you need to balance it, right? Work-life balance. But what is in my life? In my life, there's work. In my life, there's rest. So what that thinking tries to explain is how do you balance the various aspects of your life? Work being another aspect. So in my life, there's work, there's family, there's my own personal space. So you need to create those spaces and be clear without being rude. So there are things that I don't expect my team to call me at 12 in the evening. And some will tell you, don't phone me unless the building is burning. But I always argue, don't phone me when the building is burning. Call the fire brigade if the building is burning. But it has to be something that is, number one, an emergency. Number two, that I can solve at that particular point in time that you are calling me. So if you're going to call me at 7 for something that I can't solve until tomorrow 8, what you've literally done is you've disturbed the other component of my life for the whole night. Because now I can't sleep, isn't it? I'm thinking about that, but still I'm not solving. So it's to put boundaries, to put principles with your teams and say, look, I want you guys to have a life as well. So work is work. We do it, but we also balance. So there are certain things in my life is if somebody tells me their child is not well, I don't want to see them in the workplace because I know they're not giving me 100%. Go and sort your stuff. When you are in the office, give me 100%. Yeah.
Moving from leadership to brand leadership, is there anything that you're unlearning?
Yes, quite a lot. Number one, branding is not an expense. It's an investment. So one of the things that I'm unlearning as we speak, I'm learning the notion that everybody understands branding because it looks very simplistic. So I have to work, even if I face a lot of challenges, I have to spend time teaching. So I'm learning, I'm learning the assumptions that I put on leadership in terms of brand, right? So that's number one. Number two, brands are never built in the short term, right? So if your budget approach as far as branding is concerned runs for 12 months within the financial calendar of the year, you have missed it. Because you can spend a lot of money and achieve nothing. Branding is a long-term game. It's a long game. You have to play a long game and you never get return on month one. So you keep on. In fact, one of the things that you and me as marketers need to do is to tell those that are following, when things are really tight in the marketplace or in the economy, this is where you need to spend more on branding, right? It's something that we need to unlearn, because some people think that when things are tight, the first budget to cut is marketing, branding. Why should we keep on putting branding, yet we are not doing well? We have to continuously invest in the brand for it to be remembered by the customers, for it to be in the memory structures of our customers, even long after the financial crisis is gone, if ever people are going through a crisis or an economy is going through a crisis.
What belief about brand or leadership do you hold that may come up a little bit controversial, but you stand by it?
So for me, the belief that I know comes, it's a leadership one, actually, to say there's always gold in everybody. I've worked with people that you get into the rooms, you are told, no, this one is useless, or this one is, but I believe it could be just a wrong placement. There's always gold in somebody. And no matter how much bad somebody is, I can always extract gold. And 9 times out of 10, non-performers in the organization, and this I know it's a bit controversial, non-performers in the organization carry a certain percentage of leadership failure at some point in time. So your non-performance as an employee, it carries some portion of leadership failure. And as leaders, we should find out, okay, this person is not performing well. What percentage of that non-performance is a result of my leadership style?
Yeah. That's where a level of self-reflection has come into it.
It has to come through it.
Yeah.
It has to come through it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna do what we call a script pop quiz, and I know I told you not to prepare anything, because we just wanted to go off your instinct and your knowledge, obviously.
So I'm allowed to plead the fifth, right?
Yes. Yes, you can. But I think you have something here.
Okay.
Okay, one campaign you wish you had done.
Globally, I think it's the one done by Volvo. Where we had not we actually, where there were 2 trucks.
It's okay to say we in spirit you were there.
And the guy who was like the lead character in that advert was Van Damme. So there were tracks that, I just liked the technical accuracy and what they were trying to convey in that advert. So the precision, the flexibility, the messaging that came through, and the simplicity when you look at it. So for me, it's one of the campaigns that I wish I could have been part of.
And who doesn't connect to Van?
Who doesn't connect, especially people of my generation?
A book or thinker that shake your worldview.
So in terms of my worldview, one book that probably would come to mind is a book called Down Second Avenue, written by Professor Ezekiel Mpashlele, who was born in 1922. I think this was a book, maybe the year could be wrong, but this was a book that was set in apartheid South Africa, where he starts by, explaining what was happening in his neighborhood and the challenges that they faced. They were staying in a place called Marabastard and all those things. It told me 1 or 2 lessons that in spite of your background, there's always an opportunity to grow. So this guy grew under very tough conditions, but he became an icon when it comes to literature and literacy and all those things. A big contributor of how I deal with people and how I treat people. Your background doesn't matter. What matters most is what you do with what you have.
What wins when stakes are high, strategy or instinct? Do not keep the fifth.
Strategy.
Okay. Well, I'll take that one with answer. A song that gets you back in the zone.
Oh, I'm so bad with music, right? Because I can tell you, and I always say this to my friends and family. If I were to take you on my playlist, it's one of the most weirdest things that probably no one would know. From here, I could be listening to Drake, right? The next morning, not the next moment, I'm listening to Bob Marley. Then I go to Soul Brothers in South Africa. Then I go to Hillsong. So for me, music,
Eclectic taste.
yeah, Isaac, I just, yeah,
Okay. Most cringe-worthy buzzword in branding today.
cringe. Just explain that English word for me.
Just a word that people like to use and really doesn't hold substance when you think of it. For me, it's romantic. Hey, because you hear this when there's a brief going on or you're trying to come up with something that's interesting in a campaign and they say, make it authentic. And it's like, come on,
What does that mean?
what does that mean?
No, so for me, that word will be agile.
Oh, yes.
Right. If I had another opportunity, another word will be viral. Yeah. So we want to make this viral. Oh, we want to make this viral. Then the other word that normally comes to mind is on spot. On spot. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then last one, the hill you die on in a brand debate.
Brand strategy. I think in any debate, when it comes to branding, one of the things that I would die on without flinching is branding is never an expense, it's an investment. I would argue until the cows come home.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming through on brand off script. If this conversation stirred something in you, an insight, a question, maybe even a challenge, don't let it end here. Share it, pass it on. These are the kind of dialogues we need more of in boardrooms, brainstorms, and coffee chats. If you find value in today's episode, tap that subscribe button so you never miss when you go off script again. And if there's someone you believe should be in the seat, someone who's doing the work, thinking deeply, leading boldly, drop their name in the comments. We're always listening. Until next time, stay curious, stay on brand, even when you're off script.